I recently got back from an astrophotography workshop alongside Andy Mumford in Kubu Island in Botswana. Now, this is an incredible location in the middle of Botswana on the edge of Pan, where you can see these huge baobab trees and you get really good opportunities, particularly at this time of year, to photograph the rising Milky Way behind it. Now, the standard process that I have taught for years and which works really well, and you can also take a look at how I do this in this video over here, is to essentially take multiple images and then stack them on top of each other using something called StarryLandscapeStacker in order to remove the noise from the photographs. However, I think I might just have come across a cheat code to astrophotography, and that is in the form of DxO's PureRAW plugin. Let's get the disclaimer out of the way first. DxO did actually contact me a couple of weeks ago and said, please, would you like to try some of our software? See what you think about it. As it is, I'm already a very firm Nik user and have been since the days when it was still incorporated into Nikon's Capture Raw software with their U-point technology. So I'm familiar with DxO to a certain point, but I hadn't used PureRAW. What DxO PureRAW is really a plugin that you can run from any of the photo editing apps, including Lightroom and Capture One. In fact, you can even open the files directly into PureRAW from Finder. But what it does is it optimizes the raw file itself before you actually go into your raw editor, and you can then continue adjusting it. So it turns it into a digital negative or DNG file, but with slightly better noise operation than, for instance, the Adobe or Capture One converter is going to give you. And I was skeptical, to say the least, when I first started using this, but I have to admit now that I might just have had my mind changed. To say that the noise reduction and cleanup of these raw files is impressive is a complete understatement. It is mind-boggling how good the file comes out if you're shooting in high ISO settings. So for instance, if I'm photographing the Milky Way, I'm probably going to be up at around 3200 or 6400 ISO for a 15-second exposure. And usually there is a lot of luminance noise and chroma noise inside the photographs themselves. That's that kind of grainy stuff that you see in the photograph, particularly in the shadows when you're photographing your long exposure, high ISO images of the night sky. Rather than taking a whole bunch of images and stacking them to remove the median noise, now you can take an individual image, open it in PureRAW, adjust its parameters for noise reduction, and output it, and you now get an extraordinarily clean file. We're going to jump behind the computer and we're going to compare the two processes. One using the stacking process and one using DxO PureRAW, which is just a plugin and is very, very quick to use. Before I get into this though, DxO have offered a special, a 15% discount on the cost of PureRAW. All you need to do is go to the DxO online shop, and when you are ready to check out, type in Emil15 to receive a 15% discount on your perpetual license of the software. And this is one of the cool things about DxO, is the fact that it is a perpetual license. Possibly you might have to pay for an upgrade somewhere in the future, but if you never want to get that upgrade, you'd never have to pay for another fee. It isn't a tithe or a subscription fee, it is a perpetual license. I kind of like that. We're behind the computer now, and I'm just going to look quickly at how PureRAW works in conjunction with something like Capture One. Now, Capture One, because it isn't necessarily a catalog-based system like Lightroom, doesn't need to have the software imported for you to be able to do a proper round-trip experience with it. You just need to use Capture One in sessions, which is how I kind of like using it. So I have my images here, and I have already selected some of the photographs of a particular shoot in Kubu Island, or on Kubu Island, I should say. And you can see here is my shot of the stars. I've got a long exposure shot of the foreground, which I'll blend in, and then some light painting shots, which I'll also add into my mix to be able to put together the final vision of what I wanted to capture. Ordinarily, I would have created up to 20 images of the same frame, shot sequentially after each other so that I could stack them in StarryLandscapeStacker and thereby get rid of any random pixel noise that would occur inside the photographs. Here you can see my examples. I've got a couple of these things starred, but basically I have 20 odd photographs, all with the same settings, which I would stack in StarryLandscapeStack. And I'll show you the comparison after I've finished with the PureRAW conversion. The important thing to remember is that if I'm going to be doing any blending, I need to convert all of the photographs using the same processor so that when I layer them in Photoshop or Affinity, the photographs will actually match. Otherwise, you can end up with some weird kind of shifting of pixels because one converter might use a lens correction while the other one doesn't. So I'm going to open up all 5 of these photographs and I'm going to open them in PureRAW. So I'll just right click on the images and I will say open with, and there's my DxO PureRAW 6. There you go. Here are the photographs and they're all inside there. And I will say process with preview. Now, process with preview means that I can actually see what I'm doing while I change my settings inside the photograph. And you'll have a little bar in the middle so that you can either see before or after, or you can change that to a simple before after click like so. All right, so we're going to go into the before and after with the bar across here. And I'm going to use Deep Prime XD3, which is the most comprehensive of the algorithms for removing the noise. And if I want to, I can zoom in by just clicking Command 1 to get to 100 life-size view. And of course, you can also make it bigger by going into the zoom block at the top and pushing into 200. Give it a few moments to generate, and you can start to see some of the noise before and after. Now, if you want to, you can obviously do the same process using DxO's Photo Labs, which means that you can also add exposure to your image. You can brighten it right there and then. I'm going to use the round trip technique using Capture One, so I will brighten it at a later stage. At the moment, all I want to do is get rid of the noise. So I'm going to bring my luminance up a little bit, and I'm going to take my force details back. Now, force details is almost like sharpening the image. What I do find it does, though, is it adds a little bit of crunchiness to the photo. So I'm just going to increase my luminance until I can remove the noise that I can see, and we'll just shift about the image to see what's happening with the noise. That's looking pretty good. I'll actually reduce this a little bit because having a little bit of random noise does help. I'm going to apply my chromatic aberration and my lens distortion and vignetting. So we'll actually do the full corrections that are available in the DxO software. So we'll get a cleaned up image in terms of the geometry of the photograph as well. Once I'm happy with that, I'll click on to the next image and we will do the same things again. So make sure our vignette and our lens distortion is the same. And this is my long exposure photograph. So I'll just zoom in and we'll take a look at what's happening down inside here. It's looking pretty clean. I might force a few more details and just reduce my luminance just a touch over here as well. And then we'll do the same again with our light painted images. And these are looking pretty good. One thing that I have noticed over here is that I am getting my hot pixels. Now, I've said before in previous videos that Capture One has like this magic slider that gets rid of dead pixels. And it does, which is great, except it doesn't work once you've converted the file from PureRAW back into Capture One. If you want to remove your hot pixels, and I can show you another example down in this photograph, which is my long exposure foreground. So let's just zoom in and head down to the bottom, and you can see there are some dead pixels over here. Now, it will try to remove them for the most part, but if you actually want to properly remove your dead pixels, you either have to take a black frame subtraction, which you will process in the same way and remove it in Photoshop, or you would have to use DxO Photo Labs. Now here is the same photograph in DxO Photo Labs, and again, there you can see there's a hot pixel inside my photograph. And if I go into my Deep Prime XD3 denoising in Photo Labs, there's now a dead pixel slider. Slide it across to the right and they disappear. So if you want to go the whole route, you can of course get Photo Labs, which includes PureRAW inside it. However, if you just want to get the plugin, it seems that it doesn't actually have the hot pixel removal, which is odd. Possibly it's just my copy of it, I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if you have it any different on your particular version. It might also be something that comes through in an update in the near future. At any rate, this doesn't get rid of the hot pixels. Something to be aware of. We'll then just finish doing the rest of our photographs. So we'll make sure that they all have their vignetting and their lens corrections. They all have to be the same. Remember that. And then what I will do is I will add to queue and process the photograph. So we'll just hit process. And then what happens is they reappear inside Capture One. So I have actually put them inside my DxO variants over here. And you can see there is my star photograph. And here is my long exposure and my light painted photographs, which I would then go through and layer to be able to produce my final photograph. What I'm going to do now, though, is look at the variation between a DxO PureRAW converted single file and 20 images stacked and blended using StarryLandscapeStacker. So I have those two set up in a folder over here, and you could see I have these two photos. Here are my results from StarryLandscapeStacker. And if I zoom in, you can see I have very little noise inside this photograph. The scary thing, as I discovered, is that when I look at my PureRAW photo, it is a very similar amount of noise, if not less. You can probably find a little bit more light in the halo around the core inside the stacked photograph. That light seems to have disappeared a little bit from my PureRAW photograph. But remember, this is a single photograph. That is an extraordinary amount of detail that has come through from that photograph itself. Is this the new cheat code for astrophotography? If you're only wanting to do a single photograph, I would say yes. This is extraordinary results from just a single photograph. Now bear in mind, this photo was processed to get more or less the same results in terms of color. You'll notice that the StarryLandscapeStacker probably has a smoother gradient along the edges, again because it is using the brightest pixels from a whole stack of photographs and then removing the noise. Whereas when you're using a single frame, you don't have that kind of gradient anymore. So you can see the edges of the frame have something more of a vignette that you just don't see inside the stacked photograph. The stacked photograph also seems to have more luminance depth to the Milky Way core compared to the photograph from DxO PureRAW. Having said that though, this is just very basic controls that I've used to be able to bring out the actual Milky Way itself. I can still bring this into Affinity or Photoshop and I can tweak to be able to get my actual Milky Way looking more impressive. The final result is going to end up looking something like this. Here you can see I now have got more of that halo coming around the edge of the Milky Way. The photograph is looking more along the lines of what I would like to see it as. Now, the most important part of all of this, though, is that when you're using a single frame, and again, just look at how clean that looks. When you're using a single frame, you get the stars coming through the branches of the tree itself. The problem when you are using a stacked photograph, and I'll jump through to a stacked image over here, is that the stars don't always come through because you have to create an incredibly precise mask in StarryLandscapeStacker or Sequator if you're using that in order to get your stars to come through. It's very difficult. Being able to do it with one single photograph means that you can actually get those stars coming through the branches of your trees without having to worry about alignment issues or by creating a mask that's actually going to show them through. So once more, this is my final result showing the full combination of a long exposure foreground photograph, a single photograph of the Milky Way, and then a couple of extra frames where I very gently light painted in to show detail inside the bark and the boughs of this particular baobab tree. I'm definitely going to be playing more with this PureRAW plugin because it seems to be able to do a fast track result in producing really clean Milky Way skies compared to the older process of stacking a whole bunch of photographs together in order to be able to get a nice clean noiseless sky. This could potentially be the cheat code to astrophotography. Cool, that's it. That's my impressions of the DxO PureRAW plugin. I am pretty impressed. And I have to say that as a cheat code for astrophotography, it's very, very impressive. Remember that if you want to purchase a license for DxO PureRAW, you can add in Neil15 to receive a 15% discount from your purchase of it. And of course, if you liked this video, please remember to prop a like and a subscribe in the blocks around the YouTube screen. I'll be talking about more of the DxO options going forward, but I'm on my way off to another workshop at the end of this week, so it'll have to wait until I get back from Madagascar. Till then, happy shooting. Cheers.